Every morning, before the first rays of the sun had fully broken through the clouds, a small, scruffy dog would appear at the corner of Maple Street, sitting patiently by the bus stop bench. The dog, a mixture of golden retriever and mutt, had matted fur and eyes that seemed too wise for its years. Its name, as the locals called it, was Charlie, but no one really knew whether that was his real name, or if it even mattered. Charlie's routine was simple, yet unchanging. Rain or shine, summer or winter, he would make his way from wherever he had spent the nights under the bridge nearby, sometimes curled up behind the bakery and arrive at the bus stop just as the first bus rumbled down Maple Street. He never left until the last bus had gone, and then he would slowly wander back, tail low, but not entirely without hope, as if waiting for something or someone that would never return. People in the neighborhood had noticed him. At first, he was just that stray dog, the one who liked to scavenge around the trash bins behind the diner. But as weeks turned into months, Charlie became something more. He became part of the rhythm of the street. The bus drivers began to recognize him. They would slow down and honk gently to see if he would lift his ears. The children on their way to school would wave, and sometimes, if they had an extra piece of bread or a leftover biscuit, they would offer it to him. Charlie accepted these small gestures with polite gratitude, but his heart, it seemed, belonged somewhere else entirely. The story of Charlie began long before anyone on Maple Street had noticed him. It began with a man named Thomas. Thomas was a quiet man in his 50s, a schoolteacher who had recently retired and spent his days reading by the window of his small apartment on the corner. Thomas had found Charlie as a puppy, shivering in the cold outside a grocery store, abandoned and alone. He had brought him home, wrapped him in a thick blanket, and whispered, "You're safe now." From that day forward, Charlie had been his shadow, his companion through quiet mornings and long afternoons. Thomas had a simple life, but it was full. He and Charlie had their rituals. Morning walks to the park, afternoons in the garden, evenings on the couch with Thomas reading aloud from whatever book had captured his fancy that week. To anyone else, it might have seemed mundane, but to Charlie, it was everything. Then, one cold December morning, Thomas didn't wake up. A heart attack, sudden and silent, had taken him from his small apartment, leaving Charlie alone in a world that suddenly felt vast and unrecognizable. The neighbors, unsure what to do with the dog, tried to coax him inside, but Charlie refused. He padded softly through the apartment, sniffed at Thomas's favorite chair, and then, as if remembering a promise, trotted out the door and down the street. Charlie's first stop was the bus stop. It had been Thomas's bus stop, too. Every morning, Thomas had waited there for the number 42 bus that would take him to the library, to the grocery store, or sometimes just down the street to the diner where he liked to have his coffee. Charlie could sense the absence. He could feel it in the air. And so he waited, every day, hoping that perhaps today would be different, that Thomas would come walking down the street. Just a few minutes late, whistling the tune he always hummed. At first, people tried to drive him away. Stray dogs, after all, were a nuisance, or so they thought. But Charlie never growled, never barked aggressively. He simply sat, sometimes lifting his paw in greeting, sometimes laying down with his head, resting gently on the cold pavement. Slowly, the neighbors began to notice him not as a nuisance, but as a fixture. Mrs. Hendricks, who ran the corner bakery, started leaving scraps of bread for him each morning. "Poor thing," she would say, shaking her head as she watched him sit there, waiting for someone who will never come back. But even as she said it, Charlie's unwavering hope softened her words. There was a dignity to him, a quiet devotion that could not be denied. The local school children became particularly fond of him. They would draw pictures of Charlie and hang them on the notice board at school. They would make signs that said, "Charlie is our hero." And sometimes, when a bus would pass without stopping, they would shout, "Don't worry, Charlie! He'll come tomorrow!" And though he didn't understand the words, Charlie understood the intent. He wagged his tail politely, as if to acknowledge that he had heard, and then returned to his vigil. Seasons changed. Spring brought a flurry of green and the scent of blooming flowers. Charlie's coat, once dull and matted, began to shine slightly as the sun warmed his back. Summer came with heat and humidity, and the children would sit beside him, fanning him with their little notebooks and whispering stories they knew Thomas would have loved. Autumn painted the trees in gold and red, and Charlie's eyes seemed to mirror the melancholy of the falling leaves. Winter returned with its cold bite, and Charlie, now older, shivered more often. But still, he waited. One morning, a young woman named Lily stopped at the bus stop. She was new in town, having moved from the city for a fresh start. She noticed Charlie immediately, sitting, as he always did, eyes fixed on the horizon. Lily crouched down and extended her hand. "Hey there," she whispered. Charlie sniffed cautiously but didn't move. Instead, he tilted his head and blinked slowly, a gesture that seemed to say, "I'm waiting." Over the next few weeks, Lily made a habit of stopping by. She brought treats, blankets, and sometimes just her presence. She didn't try to take Charlie home, not at first. She understood something about him that others didn't. He wasn't lost. Not really. He had a purpose, and it was one he refused to abandon. "Curious?" Lily asked around, and that's when she learned the story. Thomas, the teacher, the retired man who had loved this dog more than anyone could imagine. Lily felt a lump in her throat. She knelt beside Charlie one evening as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the street. "He loved you so much," she whispered, "and you loved him back. That's why you wait." Charlie leaned into her hand, letting her strokes calm him, but his eyes never left the empty road. Then, one particularly stormy night, the winds blowing with the kind of ferocity that rattles windows and shakes trees, Lily heard a soft whimpering at her door. She opened it to find Charlie, drenched and shivering, looking at her with a mix of desperation and trust. She wrapped him in her coat and brought him inside. For the first time since Thomas had passed, Charlie allowed himself to rest without waiting, though he kept a watchful eye on the street outside. Word of Charlie's vigil spread beyond Maple Street. Local newspapers wrote small features, and soon, people from other parts of town came to see the dog who had refused to give up on love. Some left gifts, others left notes of encouragement. And in the quiet moments, Charlie would read them, or at least he would sit with them at his paws as if he understood every heartfelt word. Months passed, and life moved on. But Charlie's devotion remained unchanged. Lily, realizing that Charlie's heart was anchored to the memory of Thomas, did something extraordinary. She built a small, cozy shelter near the bus stop. It was warm, dry, and comfortable, but not a home that would trap him. It was a place where he could wait in comfort, with blankets and water, under the care of people who understood his love. One evening, as the sun set in a sky painted with oranges and purples, Charlie lay in his shelter. The buses had gone. The streetlights flickered on, and he closed his eyes for a moment, dreaming, perhaps, of Thomas's hand on his head, of the quiet apartment, of the mornings in the garden. It was then that something extraordinary happened. A little boy, no more than 7, approached Charlie with a small package wrapped in brown paper. He knelt and opened it to reveal a notebook filled with sketches of Charlie, drawings of him waiting, pictures of the two of them together with Thomas in the background. "I think he'd like this," the boy said softly. "He loved you, right?" Charlie sniffed the notebook, nuzzling it gently, and then looked up at the boy with eyes that seemed to understand everything. For a moment, it was as if Thomas were there, smiling, whispering, "Thank you." Charlie never stopped waiting. But now, he was surrounded by a community that loved him as much as he had loved Thomas. And while he still held on to hope for his owner, he also discovered something new. The power of memory, the warmth of kindness, and the enduring capacity of love to touch lives long after someone is gone. Years passed. Charlie grew older, his muzzle turning gray, his steps slower. Yet, he remained a fixture at the bus stop, a symbol of unwavering loyalty and heart. People who had moved away would return just to see him, leaving messages of gratitude and admiration. And on quiet mornings, when the world was still and the buses had not yet begun their rounds, Charlie would sit, eyes fixed on the horizon, and whisper with his heart, "I am waiting, always waiting, for you, Thomas." And in the memory of a little dog and a man who loved him, the town found something rare and precious. A reminder that love, once given, never truly leaves us. It waits patiently, quietly, faithfully, just like Charlie at the bus stop.